another edition of the Kickstarter Weekly. This is the video series in which I look at the best, in my opinion, games that will be completing their funding in the coming week on crowdfunding, usually Kickstarter and GameFound. In this week's edition, all 5 games that I'm going to be talking about are on Kickstarter. But before we get to those 5 games, I am first going to talk to you about the 3 games that I have played since the last video. Thank you very much for being here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get busy talking about some games. So the first game that I played this past week is Bonfire by Stefan Feld. I've actually played this before. Not too long ago. I played it at a 2-player count with a friend who really didn't like it because he wasn't able to execute the things that he'd been planning. Now, it was his first play, and I think he should have looked at it as a learning play, but he didn't. He got kind of frustrated. So on this most recent game, I played with 2 other friends. We played a 3-player game. We all really enjoyed the game, so much so that we are planning on playing it again on our next gaming get-together with those same 3 people. And they've already asked me about the expansion, which was supposed to be out this year. I think it's called Trees and Creatures, and it's been delayed until the end of the year. It's a fantastic game. It's a lot of fun. There are a lot of things that you can do in the game. There's a lot of variability in the game. So I think we'll have plenty more to keep us busy during any future plays before the expansion finally does release. And I'm really looking forward to playing the game a bunch more, including at the solo player count, and teaching my fiance Kristen to play it. I think it's something that's actually going to appeal to her. There's just so much that you can do in this game and so much you can try to pull off. It's not easy to pull it off, but it's fun to have big plans and it's fun to try. And it's fun to get as close to all of your big plans as you possibly can. Now, thematically, what's going on in Bonfire is players are playing these different tribes of gnomes. They're living in a fantasy world, and there are bonfires that kind of exist in these towns. They keep the world going, and they keep magic alive, and the bonfires have started to go out. So the gnome tribes have gone to a specific city, and they found that there's only one bonfire left and only one guardian left protecting the bonfire. And the guardian tasks the gnomes with going to the surrounding islands where the rest of the guardians have relocated to prove themselves to the guardian, to prove that they should have access to the bonfires and that the bonfires should continue to burn. What that means is that players are going to be doing a variety of actions to get these bonfires burning and protected. Now, the most important ones, the highest scoring ones, are traveling on their ships to the various islands where the guardians have relocated and taking on tasks. Now, once they get a task, they will plug that into their player board, and then on a future turn, when and if they complete the task, they can flip it over and send one of their novices that corresponds with that bonfire that's now lit to the High Council to get bonus action. Now, to get all of these bonfires really burning well, they're going to be doing a variety of actions. They're going to be recruiting more guardians onto their player board. They're going to be building a path across their player board and hopefully walking the guardians down these paths, because once they get these tasks and they flip the tasks over after they're completed, they will have these bonfires. They can walk the guardians along these paths to the bonfires. They'll need to also acquire portals so that the guardians can then pass through the gateway and protect the bonfire. So they're building paths, they're collecting portals, they're walking the guardians, across these paths. After they obtain the guardians, they're getting the tasks themselves, completing those to make them into bonfires, and then they're moving the guardians next to the bonfires to protect them. Players will get the most points in the game from completing those tasks and from getting the guardians to protect the bonfires. They'll also get points when they match the color of the path to the color of the task or bonfire that's aligned with it. They'll get points when they collect portals that allow the guardians access. They'll get points for certain goals that everyone can also get, getting kind of all of one thing, all of the paths or all of the portals, or all of the cards that you can get underneath your board, which will either give you ongoing powers during the game or endgame bonus scoring at the end of the game. So they're doing all of these things during the game, but the most important thing is to complete those tasks and to get the Guardians to protect the bonfires. Now, this is billed as a heavier game. It doesn't really feel that heavy when you start playing it because none of the systems in the game are that complicated. What is complex is how many different mechanical systems there are. And the further that you get into the game, the more you need all of those systems to kind of work together so that you can score a lot of points. There's a lot of coordination in the game that becomes more and more evident the further along you get in the game. And by the time you get to the end of the game, the players who have successfully coordinated everything the best, they're going to score the most points. So this was a huge hit with my gaming group of 3. I think I've already mentioned we plan to play it again the next time that we meet. And I think this is something that my fiance Kristen is going to enjoy. She doesn't always like really heavy games, although she plays them well. She usually beats me at them. But she doesn't always like the crunch of learning those heavier games. I think this may be an exception for her because I think she will like the point salad approach in this game, the way the different systems work, and the theme, the kind of overlying theme of the game. It's also, I think, quickly become my favorite Feld game. Now, I haven't played a ton of Feld games. I've played Macau, I've played Castles of Burgundy, I think 1 or 2 others. But I really like everything about this game. I like the way that the theme works, the mechanics kind of work together, and it has me really excited to play Luna, which I plan to do very soon, as well as Merlin. I own the Merlin big box. And I've heard that the more expansions that have been released for that and the more people have played it with more expansions, the more people are really, really loving Merlin as well. And then eventually I have the current 4 games that were produced through the Stefan Feld City Collection series from Queen Games. I have those coming. So one of them is a new version of Macau, one of them is a new version of Bruges, one of them is a completely new game altogether. But I have a feeling that for me, the way Bonfire works, both with its mechanics and its theme and the way it kind of comes together, that's going to be hard for me to top. So for now, my rating for Bonfire is going to stay consistent with the first time I rated it, and it's going to remain at a 9.0. I also happen to play the game Cryo again. Now, that is a game I first played when it came out a couple years ago. It was co-designed by Luke Laurie and Tom Jolly, and it uses many of the same systems that Luke Laurie also used in his game Dwellings of Eldervale. It's a tighter game, it's a bit quicker, and it's more focused on one specific thing, which is getting all of your sleep pods. Thematically, what's happened is players are astronauts who have crashed down on a foreign planet, on an alien planet, and as soon as the sun goes down for the night, things are going to get so cold that life cannot be supported. So the various players are trying to get their sleep pods with their humans down underground in some underground caverns where they can survive. And there's a competition going on for that. It's basically an area majority mechanic, and that is mainly how players are going to score points and how they will generally win the game. There are some other ways that they can score points as well. Now, I played Cryo originally at 2 players. I don't think it really plays best at 2 players. We played it at 3, the same group that we played Bonfire with last weekend, and I liked it more than I did with 2. I still think it's kind of a spare game. There's not really enough going on mechanically for me to love it. I feel like I need an expansion or 2 to add to Cryo, to give it some more crunch and have it be a truly satisfying, fun, fulfilling experience. What we currently have in Cryo is a much tighter game that's centered around this area control. Now, I did like it more with 3 players than with 2. I think the thing that I like most about the game is the artwork. The card art and the board art, it's just so bright and colorful and captivating. It really works well with this theme and sort of captures the imagination through that sci-fi setting of kind of a 50s era sci-fi feeling. So I like the game on a superficial level. I think it looks really pretty, and I did think that it worked better at a higher player count. I'd be willing to play it again at a higher player count. I think there are good choices to be made within that player count. And I think if you're looking for a worker placement game that uses area control, that is not that hard to teach and plays in a shorter amount of time, maybe 1 to 2 hours, it's a pretty good entry into the genre. I actually think, though, that Luke's other game, Dwellings of Eldervale, is a more enjoyable, more fun, more substantial game. It uses some of the same mechanics, but I like the way that Dwellings of Eldervale uses it more. And so I think eventually Cryo will probably leave my collection and I'll keep Dwellings of Eldervale. I think that they're just similar enough that I don't need both, and I like Dwellings better. So for me, I can't remember what I rated Cryo the first time. I think it was in the 6s. Because I enjoyed it more this time, I'm going to increase the rating a little bit, but it's going to come in at a 7.0. So I do think it's a solid game, and I think for the right group of people, it's going to be a really good choice. But I think that group of people is probably lighter gamers who want something to play quicker without too many mechanical systems in it, and kind of has a tight little head-to-head battle for area control dominance. If that all sounds good to you, then Cryo might be your game. It is a retail game as well, so you can get it fairly cheaply. It's not bloated by Kickstarter costs. Now, the third game that I played is called The Loop. It's a cooperative game. It has players trying to defeat the evil Dr. Foe, and he's doing some time traveling. He's trying to take apart the fabric of the universe. He's creating clones of himself that threaten to kind of take over these 7 different time periods. So the board is a modular board, and players are working together. They have a certain number of action points that are based on their cards every round. They'll be able to trigger those cards, and sometimes if they use certain green cubes on the board, they'll be able to refresh the cards and use them again. But essentially what players are doing, they start the game with 2 different missions that are available. They're trying to complete those missions, and they're also trying to stop both Dr. Foe's clones and these red cubes from overrunning the board. Now, there are 4 different missions in the game. Each mission, I believe, has 3 different difficulty settings. There is also an expansion coming later this year. I think it might even be out right now. It's either out now or coming very, very soon. And then there's also 5 different characters that you can play. So between all the different missions, the different characters, the difficulty settings, there's also a solo mode, and the upcoming expansion. There's plenty of things to keep a player busy with this game, I think. For us, we enjoyed it. We did feel, however, there is some fiddliness getting the game to the table the first time. There are just a lot of rules, none of which are that complicated, but there are a lot of different rules in the way that things work. And I would say on that level, if you are playing a cooperative game on the lighter side, like Forbidden Island or Horrified, I think you're going to have an easier time getting those games taught and played with very intro-level gamers. This one might be a little tougher to teach the first time out. And I think that at the end of the day, there's not really enough going on in this game to make it that much better than, say, Horrified. There's a little bit more variability. There are different things that you can do, but once you kind of finally get into the groove of how this game plays and what you're trying to do, it's still going to feel kind of repetitive. And I don't think any better than a game like Horrified. So I do plan on playing The Loop a few more times with Kristen. I want to play the various missions, but I have a feeling we're going to play them all on the easiest difficulty and then sell the game and not end up getting the expansion. I just don't think there's enough in it to really make the game shine head and shoulders above other cooperative games. And I think there's enough fiddliness in the game that it prevents it from being learned easily by lighter gamers, which is where I think the target audience is for this. So with lighter gamers, I would still recommend playing probably Horrified. That's usually my go-to. Or the Forbidden series, like Forbidden Island and Forbidden Desert. I haven't played Forbidden Sky, so I can't really speak to that one. Or even just Pandemic. Although I think if you're going for Pandemic, the thing that you want to do is play one of the legacy games. And those games tend to kind of ramp up the teach as you go along. So it's not teaching you a lot at the beginning. It teaches it as you go. And I think because of that, even the Pandemic legacies don't really feel any more complicated than this game. Now, it's got a crazy, vibrant, fun art style, which I think is a huge selling point for the game. And if you like simpler co-ops and you want ones that have a decent amount of variability baked into it, this is certainly a good game for you to try and check out. But for me, for a person who likes more complicated games, I'm looking for gems when I'm looking for lighter cooperative games. Just a few really, really strong gems that I want to keep in my collection. I'm in the process of getting rid of Forbidden Island because I feel like I've replaced it with Horrified, and I'm fairly certain this one will get removed as well. So for me, my go-to lighter game, cooperative game, is going to remain Horrified. And that will be the game that I teach intro-level gamers if I'm looking for a cooperative game. If I'm looking for a really fun, involved, heavier game that has more going on, something that's more in my wheelhouse, for a cooperative game, I'm going to go for something like Dice Throne Adventures, or Unsettled, or Sleeping Gods, all of which are amazing games. And if I want something puzzly, I'm probably going to go for The Seventh Continent, or one of the entries in the Time Stories series. So those have my interest more than The Loop. The Loop is just a little too simplistic for my tastes, plus having enough fiddliness to make it a little difficult to initially get to the table. So at the end of the day, for these three games, Bonfire's coming in with a 9.0, Cryo rises a little bit to a score of 7.0, and The Loop is also going to have a score of 7.0. That done, let's move forward to the 5 crowdfunding games that are going to be completing their campaigns this coming year. Is Kingdom Builder Empire Edition. This campaign had a minimum required funding goal of $15,000. They're currently at $170,000, which is about 11 times that minimum required funding goal. Kingdom Builder Empire Edition is going to complete its funding on Wednesday, May 15th. It's a game for 2 to 5 players, plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and I'd mean just barely medium light. It's almost light. It just barely kind of edges into the medium light level of complexity from light. And we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low. Now, Kingdom Builder is a city building game essentially. On your turn, you're going to be using one card, just one card, to build 3 different settlements or houses on certain hexes on the board. That's all you're doing. You're just using one card to build some settlements on the board, and that's your turn, and that's the game. So it's city building, and it's a race. Now it's a race because as soon as one player goes out of all of their settlement buildings, the game's done. And in terms of how you score points in this game, that is largely going to depend on the variability of that particular gameplay, because you're going to get some random goal cards on the side of the board, and you're going to get 4 different objective tiles. So you'll be getting powered abilities and sometimes points for using those tiles, and you'll be scoring points for the objectives that you're able to complete. There's a lot of variability because those are going to be different every single game, but the game is incredibly simple, not complicated at all, and the only thing that's kind of changing are those ways that you score points. So it's a simple game, it's very easy to teach, but there's enough variability in it that it will change every time you play it. The goals will be different. The way that you score points will be different. That means in general that this isn't a game that most heavier gamers or gamers that have been in the hobby for a long time are really going to want to sit down and play. It's just a little bit too simple. But if you're looking for something to play with newer gamers that has some variability in it, that is easy to teach and quick to play, this is a great game to have in your collection. Now the game is designed by Donald X. Vaccarino. The other big game that he designed was Dominion. He actually designed Dominion first, and then he went on to design Kingdom Builder. Dominion's another game that has a lot of different expansions, and a lot of that gameplay is all achieved through the unending variability of all of these different expansions. So if we look at Donald's highest rated games on Board Game Geek, they are Dominion, Dominion Intrigue, and Dominion 2nd Edition. There are 2 different artists involved with this version of the game. Marcus Ert has previously worked on Copenhagen, Pioneers, and Treasure Hunter, and Oliver Schlemmer has previously worked on Carnival of Monsters, Escape, Curse of the Temple, and Fresco. Finally, this is being published by Queen Games, who are best known for Amerigo, Chicago Express, Fresco, Lancaster, and Shogun. There are 4 different pledge levels associated with this campaign, but there's really only one in essence, because the first 2 pledge levels are upgrade kits. The 3rd pledge level is an early bird, which may not be available anymore, and so the one real pledge is the final and 4th pledge. But before I get there, let's talk about the others. So for $59, you can pledge the upgrade starter kit, which is going to include some quality of life upgrades, some resin tokens, some plastic miniature castles, just for the castles, not for the player units, just for the castles that sometimes appear on the board, and the Emperor's Choice Queenie. And whenever Queen Games has Queenies, they're essentially promos. So they could be cards, they could be tiles, but they're little extra promos, and they call them Queenies after their company name. So those things will all come in that upgrade starter kit, and you can use those to upgrade any other version of the game that you have and just give you some extra bling to it. But that's not all of the quality of life upgrade. If you pledge $149, which is the upgrade kit, so this is kind of more quality of life upgrades beyond the upgrade starter kit, this also can be used for any version of the game because it's giving you more things that are upgrades, but still just upgrades. That's going to include quarry gems instead of the cardboard resources in the game, miniatures for all of the players' little settlements. So instead of wooden blocks, they'll be able to upgrade them to custom plastic miniatures that'll look a little bit different and be different colors for every player, as well as some larger terrain cards and some new player boards. So again, these things can all be used with previous versions of the game. They are just quality of life upgrades, blinging out Kingdom Empire. For $239, you can pledge the early bird Kingdom Builder Empire Edition. And for $249, you can pledge the Kingdom Builder Empire Edition. So if you get there early, I think the last time I looked, there were still 2 pledges left at the early bird rate. You may be able to get it $10 cheaper. If you pledge at the higher level, you may want to check back every once in a while because someone may drop that early bird pledge and free it up, and then you can take it over and pledge it for $10 less than the normal Kingdom Builder Empire Edition. Either way, you're getting the exact same rewards at either the $239 or $249 level. You're getting this new Empire Edition of the game. Now, what is that? Well, it's the base game of Kingdom Builder with 4 expansions all built in. And those expansions are Nomads, Crossroads, Marshlands, and Harvest. So essentially the Empire Edition is the base game plus 4 expansions all in one. Now, if you pledge either one of those editions, though, the Early Bird or the Empire Edition, you will also be getting all of those other upgrades. So you'll get the base game packaged with the 4 expansions, and then all of that extra bling that's available in these starter kits. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $7, $22, and $32. So $7 is for that upgrade starter kit. $22 is for the upgrade kit, the bigger one with everything. And then $32 is for either the early bird or the regular edition of Kingdom Builder Empire Edition. They do have a shipping estimate of $42 as well. That is if people are pledging for multiple copies of the game. So if you're going in with your friend, you're getting 2 copies of Kingdom Builder Empire Edition, then you can get $42 for the whole thing to ship. But for most people, if they're just buying 1 copy of the game, they're going to be looking at $32 shipping for the Empire Edition. And finally, Queen Games is planning on delivering Kingdom Builder Empire Edition in October of 2022. From there, we go to Waste Knights Beyond the Horizon. This had a minimum required funding goal of $21,000. It's currently at $191,000, which is about 9 times that minimum required funding goal. This one is also going to complete its funding on Wednesday, May 18th. The game is designed to play 1 to 4 players in about 90 to 180 minutes, so that's an hour and a half to 3 hours. Complexity on Waste Knights is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium high. Now, this is a cooperative game. Players are various characters in a post-apocalyptic landscape. They've got action points, they've got variable player abilities, And there are all different kinds of scenarios in the game. So there are some that are cooperative, there are some that are competitive. I think there may even be one or two that are specifically solo, but it's kind of a grab bag of game modes. They did Waste Knight's second edition a couple of years ago. I actually backed it at that time. I own it. It's one of my favorite games from that year. It's a really good game. It's a little rough around the edges in some ways, but like a lot of cooperative games, players are going to have certain statistics. They're going to be going on different missions. There's a lot of storytelling and reading and things involved, and then players having to roll for skill checks and trying to complete different goals and missions. And there's also some amount of pick up and deliver in the game as well. It's definitely an exploration and storytelling game. And I was really impressed with Waste Knight's second edition and the writing and the level of characterization and the theme and the way they approached it and the style in that game. I thought they did a really good job of intelligently writing the characters and their adventures. It can be kind of tongue-in-cheek at times in a funny way that makes light of some of the severity of the situation, almost like, say, Borderlands, the video game IP. But it has a real sense of intelligence and humor about the writing, and I found it very welcome in the base game, which is why I am interested in this newest expansion. And I think for a lot of players who maybe didn't know about the first game when that was first on Kickstarter, this is a great time for you to jump on board and get everything. It's designed by Marek Mydell, who worked on Seven Ronins, the original Waste Knights, and Waste Knights second edition. And there are 4 different artists involved with this new expansion. The first is Bartek Fedacek, who's worked on Unsettled, Uprising, Curse of the Emperor, and Vindication. Mikhail Lakowski has worked on Age of Thieves, King and Assassins, and Waste Knights second edition. Tomasz Sciolny previously worked on Waste Knights second edition. Michael Taliga previously worked on Age of Thieves, King and Assassins, and Waste Knights second edition. And the publisher, Galacta, is best known for The Shadow Planet and Waste Knights second edition. Now, pledge-wise, this one is very simple. If you have the game, whether you pledged the Kickstarter the first time around or you picked it up at retail, you can just get the new expansion here for 1 pledge, or you can pledge at a higher level and just get everything. If you're somewhere in between, like if you bought the first game at retail, then there are add-ons. So you can get the various things that you're missing to bring it up to the level of the original Kickstarter edition. So if you pledge $58, Fearless Sea Dog, that will get you the newest expansion and all of the stretch goals. If you pledge $168, which is called Scourge of Land and Sea, that will essentially get you the new stuff and everything from the previous first Waste Knights second edition campaign. So that's going to include the Waste Knights second edition base game, the Tales from the Outbreak expansion that came with that, the Outbreak Chronicles, and the exclusive miniature pack. Now that miniature pack is a lot of those stretch goals from the first game. So if you bought it at retail, you don't have that miniature pack and some of the extras, but you can get those through the add-ons if you don't want to pledge for everything. For $9, you can get the Castaway. That is an additional miniature that's associated with the new expansion. It's kind of like the Scavenger from the first campaign. So if you were here early and you're getting this as a freebie, great. If not, you can add it on. You can also add on the Scavenger for $7. It's the similar figure to the Castaway from the first campaign. So if you pledged the first campaign and you've got everything, you've got all of the exclusives, you already have the Scavenger. But if you got the first game at retail, you may not have the Scavenger. You can add him on here for $7. For $26, you can add on the oversized playmat. For $10, you can add on a dice tray. And also for $10, you can add on an additional dice set. $7 will get you the Outback Chronicles, which is basically a journal that you can write in, but it does come at the highest pledge level of this campaign. So this is only something that you would add on probably if you bought the first game at retail and didn't get this. For $21, you can get the Kickstarter exclusive miniatures pack from the first campaign. So again, you'll get that here at the highest pledge level, but if you bought the game originally at retail and you want all of the extras, then that is something that you'd likely want to add on. For $73, you can get Waste Knights second edition. That's the retail copy. So that means if you still want the miniature pack or the Outback Chronicles, you will also need to add those items on. And then finally, for $42, you can add on Tales from the Outback. That is the expansion from the first campaign. And again, if you get that here as an add-on, you're going to get the retail version, meaning you would still want to add on the miniatures pack and the Outback Chronicles. They've provided a range of shipping charges. So in the continental US, I'm just going to take the high range. So it's either $24 or $31. Those are both high ends of the various ranges. So if you're just getting the newest expansion, then you're going to have a shipping range where the high end is $24. And if you're getting the bigger pledge with everything, you're going to have a shipping range in the continental US where $31 is the high end of that range. Finally, Galacta is planning on delivering Waste Knights Beyond the Horizon in December of 2022. From there, we go to Age of Steam Deluxe Expansion Volumes 1, 2, and 3. Now, this campaign had a minimum required funding goal of $49,000. They're currently at $241,000, which is almost, not quite, 5 times that minimum required funding goal. This new Age of Steam campaign is going to complete its funding on Friday, May 20th. The game plays 1 to 6 players, depending on the map. So it's a train game. There's lots of different maps, and the maps are going to be specific to player count. So some of them can play as many as 6. Some of them are designed for 1 to 2 players. In general, games usually take about 2 hours. Again, that's going to depend on the player count. The complexity of Age of Steam is heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low. There's been a lot of talk over the years of who's designed Age of Steam. Most people will tell you it's either Martin Wallace or John Borer or some combination of the two. And there's also some design that goes into the various maps. So specifically for what we're looking here, we're going to list 3 different designers. The first is John Borer. He's also worked on Chicago Express, Paris Connection, and Ride the Rails. Also listed as a designer with this campaign is Chad Deshone, I believe because he's helped design a couple of the maps. And he is best known for On Tour and Sequoia. And then finally, Martin Wallace. He's best known for Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire, London 2nd Edition, Railways of the World, and Steam. The artist, I believe, on all of these maps, but certainly on the original maps for Age of Steam Deluxe, is Ian O'Toole. He's done a lot of work, especially for Eagle Gryphon, who's the publisher here. He's probably best well known for The Gallerist, Kanban EV, Lisboa, On Mars, and Venus Deluxe Edition. And then the publisher, Eagle Gryphon Games, is best known for Brass Lancashire, The Gallerist, Lisboa, On Mars, and Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. So Age of Steam is probably my favorite train game of all time. It's also probably my favorite heavy train game. It bears a lot in common with Railways of the World, although Railways of the World is a little bit lighter. Both games were designed in some way by Martin Wallace. There's talk about, he kind of sold the license multiple times after making various tweaks. So now you have 2 different games that still exist, Railways of the World and Age of Steam, which are remarkably similar. Age of Steam is a little bit more complex because generally when you're playing Age of Steam, certain actions that one player takes during a round, the other players cannot take. So it makes it a little bit crunchier. In Railways of the World, I believe you have more opportunity to take the same actions. And of course, Martin Wallace has made several other train games, including Steam, the original Steam, which is yet another similar version of the same game. But like all good train games, the variability and versatility of it is really decided by the map packs. How many different maps do you have to play on and at which player counts? So they recently, a couple years ago, did a new version of Age of Steam. They did a deluxe version through Eagle Gryphon Games. It was done in the same kind of box size and with the same production as a lot of those Vital Lacerda games that they put out in these similar big boxes. I don't want to call them big box games because they're not games where they bring in all these expansions. They are just games that literally have big boxes with lots of content. So if you know Vital Lacerda games from Eagle Gryphon, you know the box size, the box look. You even know what the art and the graphic design looks like because it is the same artist who worked on all of the initial boards for Age of Steam Deluxe Ian O'Toole. So that game came out a couple of years ago, this newer, nicer version of it, and now we've gotten to the point where I think people are wanting more maps. Now they could just sell them, individually, sell them on their website, but why not take the opportunity to do a Kickstarter and sell a lot of these maps in mass? So we have a lot of new maps that are all coming out through this campaign. And what is essentially happening is that you've got the original base game, you've got Volume 1, which is going to collect all of the maps that have previously existed in the new deluxe style. Some of those maps came with the original campaign. Some of them had to be added on, and it wasn't as obvious that they were being done in the same deluxe style, and a few of them were done later through Eagle Griffin's website. So even if you did back the original deluxe campaign and you thought you got all of the maps, you may want to double check because you may be missing a couple of the maps that were done kind of around the same time, kind of after the fact. You also do not have the Volume 1 box to put all those extra maps in. So I know for me, if I back this campaign, one of the things that I need to do is get the Volume 1 box that everything fits in with the 2 to 4 maps that I didn't get the first time around, that I kind of missed. And then everything in the expansion volumes 2 and 3, those are all new. So the cheapest pledge levels that you can back here are expansion volume 2 and expansion volume 3. If you're backing one of those tiers, it's $48. If you're backing the $48 expansion volume 2 pledge level, that's going to come with the following maps: Italy and Portugal, so each on a different side of the same board; Great Britain paired with Oklahoma and Texas; New Mexico and 1890 Berlin; and Seattle Metro with Scotland. So that is volume 2. For $48 expansion volume 3, you'll be getting these maps: Sweden Recycling with Pacific Electric, Disco Inferno with Southern China, and Osaka with the Lincoln Funeral Car. So that's all of expansion volume 3. Now for $64, you can pledge expansion volume 1, but as I said, just be a little wary, kind of double check this, because you may already have some of these maps if you pledge the first campaign for deluxe. You may have all of them, but you definitely have at least some of them, probably. But the ones that are included with the $64 volume 1 expansion pledge are France with Poland, Finland with Hungary, New England with Switzerland with Pittsburgh, and then a heavy cardboard themed map with Detroit bankruptcy on the backside. So I know personally for me, I'm missing, I think, one of those two-sided boards. For $79, you can pledge the new Age of Steam Deluxe. So this is what you want to get if you do not have the new version of the game. This is what originally was offered a couple of years ago, since been delivered, and the boards that come with this one with the base game are going to include Barbados with St. Lucia, the Western US with Germany, and the Rust Belt with the Southern US. Now, if you pledge at $94, which is everything new, you're going to be getting those 2 first pledge levels that are $48 each for expansions volume 2 and 3. So this will be all of the maps for expansions volume 2 and 3 in this $94 everything new pledge. For $245, you can pledge the all-in. That will get you the new base game, deluxe version, and all of the maps. All of them, all 3 volumes. Now, if like me, you never got the original Volume 1 expansion box, you can add that on for $10. So $10 will get you the empty Volume 1 expansion box. For $16, you can add on wooden locomotives. And then these next 4 add-ons are all going to be various boards that would have been or could be included in Volume 1. So if you're missing any of them like me, now is maybe the time to pick up the maps that you're missing along with that Volume 1 box. So for $18, you can get the France-Poland map. For $18, you can also add on the heavy cardboard Detroit bankruptcy map. For $18, you can also add on the Hungary-Poland map. And then for $24, you can add on the New England, Switzerland, Pittsburgh map. For $20, you can add on a deluxe new box with the insert. So it's essentially the new version of Age of Steam Deluxe, but just the box and the insert. Maybe you have everything else, but you don't have the box. And then you can also add on the various map packs as add-ons. So you can pledge them, but you can also add them on. So $48 would get you Volume 2, $48 would get you Volume 3, and $64, a little more expensive, will get you Volume 1. You can also add more copies of the Age of Steam Deluxe game here as an add-on. It's the same price that it is as a pledge, it's $79. You can also add on more pledges of everything new as add-ons, same price, $94. And you can add on more copies of the all-in pledge as an add-on, and it's the same price as the pledge, which is $245. Continental shipping in the US is being estimated at $9, $13, and $18. So $9 is if you're getting one set of expansion maps, $13 is if you're getting two sets of expansion maps. So say for something like Everything New, which is coming with expansion volume 2 and expansion volume 3. And then $18 is the estimated shipping price if you're getting the all-in. Finally, Eagle Gryphon Games is planning on delivering this new campaign for Age of Steam and all of these new maps in March of 2023. From there, we go to a bit of a smaller campaign. It's called Broken and Beautiful, a game about kintsugi. Now, they had a minimum required funding goal of $8,000. They're currently at $24,000, which is about 3 times that minimum required funding goal. Broken and Beautiful is going to complete its funding on Friday, May 20th. The game plays 2 to 4 players in about 15 minutes. Now, this is a light game, a very light game, and we are setting the risk associated with this campaign at high. Now, as to the type of game it is a open drafting and set collection game. It's a card game. It has a lot in common with something like Sushi Go. What makes this game a little bit unique is that players are going to have cards with various kinds of china, breakable art on it. And when certain cards that match the player's cards, the same type of art, during a round, players are going to have to break the art that they have in their hands. This means that they will flip the card over once they use little gold ingots to repair it, and that thematically represents the gold lacquer that's used to put together this kind of pottery. That actually makes this pottery a lot more valuable. The more kind of gold that you have, restoring it makes it more valuable than it originally was. It's part of the aesthetic of this kind of pottery. So players are going to have some of their china broken no matter what they do, and then they'll have to be thinking about strategically which do they repair for more points and which ones do they maybe not repair because they don't have enough gold to repair everything. The game is designed by Patrick Rowland, who designed a game called Fry Thief, and the art is by Shirley Gong, who did some really cool art on a game called Thrive that was on crowdfunding several years ago. It's being published by Left Justified Studio, and this appears to be both their first board game and their first crowdfunding game, which is the reason that we have the risk set at high. Now, you can pledge 2 different pledge levels for this. For $16, you will get the standard version of the game. It's a little bit more stripped down than the other version. For $30, you can pledge the deluxe version of the game. It's going to come with upgraded components like metal ingots, little metal bars that you're going to be using, and just a lot of kind of metal themed stuff. So there's foil stamping on the box. The box itself is a different shape and it has a metallic clasp. And there are just several different kinds of component upgrades, most of which are related to the golden lacquer theme of the game. The shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $10 and $16, depending on whether you're pledging the standard or the deluxe version. And currently, Broken and Beautiful is slated to be delivered in February of 2023. From there, we go to the final campaign of the period. This is for a game called Battlecrest. It's being published by Button Shy Games. They typically put out these 18-card wallet games. Usually they have wallets associated with the campaign, so you can just store all of your cards in a wallet. Their games are small in size, and they're fairly cheap to make. So their minimum required funding goal for this campaign was only $2,000. They're currently at $57,000, which means they're sitting at 28 times that minimum required funding goal. Battlecrest is going to complete its funding on Saturday, May 21st. This is a game for 2 players. Games typically play in about 20 minutes. The complexity level on this game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-low. Now, essentially what this game is, in addition to being an 18-card wallet game, it is a tactical skirmish game. So if you're playing with just the base game, it's a 2-player game. If you get the various expansions, you can change the player count to 1 player or up to 4 players. It's co-designed by Dustin Dobson, who's worked on Rove, Results-Oriented Versatile Explorer, and Skulls of Sedlak, as well as Milan Zivkovic, who also worked on Rove. And the 2 artists associated with Battlecrest are Jesse Turner and Fakhri Maulana, who previously worked on a game called Death Valley. That was another Button Shy 18-card game. Finally, if you're not familiar with Button Shy as a publisher, their highest rated games on Board Game Geek include Circle the Wagons, Sprawlopolis, and Tussie Mussy. For $12, you can pledge Battlecrest, and that will also come with the Imperator solo expansion, which, like a lot of these games, I believe that is a 6-card expansion. For $18, you can pledge Battlecrest plus 2 new hero expansions, and again, as they often do, I believe each of those 2 new hero expansions are also 6-card expansions. You'll still be getting the Imperator solo expansion with this pledge level, which means you would be getting 3 more expansions, solo plus the 2 new heroes that are 6 cards each, or 18 cards total, which means you'd have the base game at 18 cards, and you'd have the 2 expansions and the solo mode for an additional 18 cards. For $40, you can pledge the Intro to Button Shy pledge level. That will include all of the Battlecrest stuff, plus their 2 highest rated games, Sprawlopolis and Tussie Mussy. Now, as add-ons, for $5, you can add on a 3-button set. We're talking about the kind of buttons that you would pin on to clothing. For $12, you can add more copies of Battlecrest, also with the Imperator solo expansion. And for $6, you can pledge the expansions with the Expansion Collection wallet. I believe that Expansion Collection wallet also comes with the 2nd pledge level, where you're getting Battlecrest with the 2 expansions. But if you pledge them separately here as an add-on, you'll also get the wallet for them. So either way, you'll be able to use that additional wallet for some combination of the 2 expansions and the solo mode. Continental shipping in the United States has been estimated at $5, and Button Shy is planning on delivering Battlecrest in September of 2022. Now that brings us to the end of the campaigns that are currently running this period, but if you remember, last period was a really, really big week. I profiled 9 different campaigns, and I said that I was going to be personally pledging 6 of those campaigns. So here's what I personally pledged. I pledged Autobahn, which is co-designed by Fabio Lapano. I own 2 of his other games, Ragusa and Merv, The Heart of the Silk Road, and I think they're both great games. I do not own the other 2 games that he's designed, Kalamala and Zapotec, but I've heard good things about those games as well. But from the games that I have in my personal collection that I've played, that are designed by Fabio, I think he's a really good designer. So it was an easy jump for me to pledge Autobahn, which has players. It's a heavy euro in, I believe, a smaller box, and it has players working in the automotive industry in Germany. And it just looked like a lot of things that were up my alley, and because it was Fabio Lapano, I was good to go. I also pledged Lawyer Up Season 2, which I thought would be a really cool game to play with my fiancée Kristen. It's generally a card game, and players are taking opposing sides of various cases and using their cards to argue those sides. I passed on the game its first time around a couple of years ago when it was on Kickstarter, but I've heard good things about it, and I feel like this is probably going to be a pretty good game for us. So I decided to back it the second time around with Season 2. I also backed Oranienburger Kanal, which is a new game by Uwe Rosenberg, who I am a huge fan of. He's designed a lot of games working in various industries, sometimes farming, that have to do with various kinds of resource and using resources to produce other things. Whenever I play a Uwe Rosenberg game, it's really neat and interesting seeing how those resources are used in the game and how he's studied the economics and the industry and incorporated them into the gameplay and the game design in different ways. So I'm always really interested in his designs. Recently I played Glass Road and Hallertau, and both of those games had me wanting more games from Uwe Rosenberg. I also saw some things about how this one resembles Le Havre, which is another of his games that I own, which doesn't feel like a very complex game early on, but as you do things in the game and your engine grows, by the end of the game it can get very complex. And I like Le Havre a lot. So the fact that this was getting favorable comparisons to Le Havre also had me interested. And finally, in a unique sort of way, I guess, Oranienburger Kanal is a 1 to 2 player game. So that may limit its ability to get played, but it was still something that I wanted to look at and experience for myself and just see how well it works and how it fits in with his other designs and his other output. I also backed Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, which is the new standalone campaign related to the original Sleeping Gods. That was a campaign that I backed the first time around, and that is currently my #1 game for 2021. #1 cooperative game, #1 game of any kind. So this one, the Distant Skies campaign, is something that I was very much looking forward to because they are just doing more with a winning formula. And I really love Sleeping Gods. I'm hoping to go all the way through all the campaigns, and right now I'm kind of biding my time and hoping that that's something that I eventually get to do once we get the Twitch channel up and running, because I want to share it with everybody because it's such a fun game. So more Sleeping Gods, yes please. I also backed Uprising Titans of the First Age, and unlike Sleeping Gods, this is a game that I had passed the first time around. It's a 4X game, although when players are playing it, they're playing mostly cooperatively against the 2 enemy AI factions. So they're trying to get more points than their opponents, but nobody is going to win the game unless everybody beats these 2 AI factions. It's a 4X game, and I think when it came out the first time, there was just other stuff, a lot of other stuff that I was backing. It also has standees instead of miniatures. That's a reason that some people may not want to back it. But I think what they've done with these acrylic standees and the heat transfer process that they have to put really vibrant art on these very colorful standees, I just like the whole aesthetic. I think it is gorgeous, as good as any miniature game. So it was a tight time, I think, when it was around the first time on Kickstarter, and I didn't have the funds to back this with other things that I was backing. But I remained excited, over the last couple of years. I remembered the game, and when it came back up with a new expansion, I jumped on the opportunity to be able to back this again. I think it probably didn't hurt that another game that I was really looking forward to, Euthia Torment of Resurrection, that campaign ended up crumpling, and the publisher behind that is, for now at least, going out of business. I was really disappointed about Euthia because I had missed that one the first time around and was planning on just going all in to get all of the stuff in Euthia. And I was going to spend quite a bit of money to be able to do that, but they canceled their campaign, so that money was not going to be spent. So it made it a little bit easier, I think, for me to then go ahead and go all in on Uprising, knowing that Euthia was no longer going to be taking a chunk of my money, which I'm sad. I really wanted Euthia. Hopefully it comes back in the future in some form. And finally, I backed Wayfarers of the South Tigris. This is the first in a new trilogy by Garpilla Games. The previous trilogies they've done are Of the North Sea and Of the West Kingdom. And they have just recently, I think, finished with all of their West Kingdom Kickstarters. They did one, for all the base games, and then they came back and they did, I believe, another one for each of the game's expansions. So they now seem to have finished up all of the West Kingdom campaigns, and they're moving on to their new trilogy. Another thing that I think is really cool about this is, while they're using the same artist, the Miko, they have taken the setting of the new trilogy to a different geographical area. So instead of focusing on Anglo characters, it's got more of an Arabian theme, and the art is going to reflect that. And I'm really excited about it. I think the art looks super cool, and Garphill, their games just keep getting better and better. I think the weakest game in their collection remains the very first game that they did on Kickstarter, Shipwrights of the North Sea. But everything after that is a very welcome addition to, I think, anyone's collection, and certainly mine. So this is just more Garphill Games goodness with an evolving art style and theme that makes me very excited. Now let's complete this video with the 4 games that I have acquired since the last period. The first of those is Caverna, the Cave Farmers. As I've mentioned before, I really like Uwe Rosenberg's designs. I played Agricola very early when I sort of got back into board gaming. It's such a tight little game though. I've wanted to play it again, but I've never felt the need to go buy it for myself. I always felt that I would be more geared towards Caverna, which I think has more choices and more options, and I think it's not quite so tight with the propensity to kind of paint you into a corner. I like lots of options in my games, and I like the ability to pick and choose from those options, particularly as other players are doing other things. Sometimes players do something and it makes you think, well, I don't want to do that now. I'd rather, pursue this thing over here instead. And from everything that I know about it, Caverna is like that. It's kind of like a bigger, more expansive, but more forgiving Agricola with more mechanical systems and more ways to do things. So eventually I'll get that played, and I'll certainly have more feedback about it at that time. I also got the Paris Deluxe Big Box, which includes the newest expansion, Paris à l'Etoile. This game I also passed the first time it was on Kickstarter. It's really just kind of a set collection and area control game, and it didn't look that special to me. In the time since that game delivered, I saw how beautiful it was. I saw that there was an announcement of a new expansion, which would add more variability into the game and more ways to do things. And I'm always looking for the real gems of lighter games. I tend to like heavier games. I still want lighter games in my collection. I'm just always looking for the best of the best. And so the more I got thinking about Paris, the more I thought, yes, it is a lighter game, but I think it does the kind of thing that it does better than most other games. So it seemed like a really good opportunity with this newest expansion to pledge for it, bring it into my collection, and then see if maybe Paris is the keeper and it can knock out a couple of other games. It also doesn't hurt that the game is really gorgeous on the table. It has some physical buildings. There's a lot of table presence to it. So it does have some things in common with other games that play in different ways, with area control, with set collection, with things like that. But I have a feeling that at the end of the day, Paris does it better than most, and that it may be the one that stays in my collection. So we'll see. We'll see as I eventually get it to the table. But I think it's a game that my fiance Kristen is also really going to like. Now, I also got my copy of the newest Root Kickstarter, which included the Marauder expansion, that is 2 new factions for Root. It also includes hirelings and a hirelings box. These are essentially workers that your player's faction can hire during the game to do different things, give you different kinds of powers. And then finally, Clockwork Expansion 2, which is a new solo system, an expansion to the previous solo system. So there are kind of 3 different things in that campaign: more factions, more solo stuff, and then this additional mechanic with workers that you can hire during the game. I love Root. I think it's one of the best games out there. It doesn't even bother me that you need to teach it to people every time you play it, because every faction plays a little bit differently and uses different mechanics. So it does create a barrier to get it to the table, but I think it's such a good game that doesn't bother me. So I am all in on Root, and I'm very excited to get the newest Root stuff. The final game that I added to my collection is a game called Vagrantsong, which has been really hard to track down and find. It has had very limited retail release. In fact, I've had it on a lot of my lists at various online retailers, wish lists. So as soon as they get more copies of the game, I'm supposed to get an email. And that's happened a couple times. And the moment I've gotten the email, I've checked back at those retailers and they're already gone. So there aren't a lot of copies of this out there, and all of the various companies are running through them very quickly. I was able to track this down at one company. I just bought it as quickly as I could. I needed something to round out shipping so that I could get free shipping for the delivery. And that was the reason I purchased Caverna the Cave Farmers at this time. That's a game that I always planned on bringing into my collection, but I needed something quickly to round out that cart before Vagrantsong was gone again. Now, Vagrantsong is sort of a campaign game. It's cooperative. It takes place on a haunted train. I believe there's action points in various scenarios. I've heard such good things about it over the last 6 months as people have been able to play it in very fleeting instances. So it's kind of on my top 10, I think, for this year in terms of games that I wanted to see and play. So that wraps up another Kickstarter Weekly. Thank you very much for being here with me and listening to me talk about these games. I hope I was able to give you some new information, whether that is games that I played, games that I've acquired into my collection, or games that we're talking about that are going to be completing funding on crowdfunding this week. Again, everything this week happens to be on Kickstarter. That is the number of 2020 games that I need to finish playing before I can do my top 30 games of 2020. This period, I knocked out the Loop. So that was the 8th game. Now we're down to 7. I'm going to keep chipping away at that over the next few weeks, and soon enough we'll be down to 0, and I'll be starting up my top 30 games of 2020. And then later in this year, I will hopefully get to my top 30 games of 2021. And then as we roll forward into 2023, in the beginning part of that year, I'll get my top 30 games of 2022 out. And then that will be consistent as we kind of move forward from year to year. I'll always be doing my top 30 in the first few months, looking at the previous year. So have a great week. Play lots of great games, everyone. I know for me, I'm probably going to get Luna played this week, probably Fujikoro Deluxe with Kristen, maybe a couple more scenarios of The Loop, probably a very small wallet-sized game called Strawberry Sunset. I also hope to finish playing through my campaign of Under Falling Skies, and I may even get Kristen to play a 2-player game of Bonfire at some point this week. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you back here very soon for more gaming goodness. Take care and have a great week.